So we are here with John. John is with Triple Well. If you don't know Triple Well by now, you're probably living under a turtle shell in the sewer. So obviously, John is here with us today to go over some optimization and scaling tactics. Pretty excited for this. I think right now, in the state of just economics and Facebook, there's obviously a lot of people struggling, a lot of people trying to get things back to where they were. So I'm pretty excited to see what John has to kind of show us on what is working across all of the major ad accounts that they have things with. So John, I'll kick it over to you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Justin. So yeah, we're gonna hit some scaling and optimization tactics that I'm seeing some of the biggest brands, most successful brands using right now. And I'm gonna cover stuff that big brands are using and small brands are using in ecom. I'll also try and, because I know there's a lot of different kinds of media buyers here, I'll also try and vary this for people who are like affiliates or doing lead gen or stuff like that as well. But obviously with Triple Well, most of my experience is in ecom. So a little bit about me. I am the head of consulting at Triple Well. Basically, I mean, I lead a team that does this, but right now it's just me and one other person. So basically this just means I take like 50 to 100 calls a week with different brands. I've done over 1,000 calls in the last 4 months, from anyone from 250K, 500K a year up to 250 million a year. My paid consulting clients, so we have a paid consulting add-on service. My paid consulting book of business does around $500 million a year in sales. Triple Whale also obviously just has a lot of data. We got 11,000 stores. I'm kind of an old head in this space. I've been doing digital marketing in some form for 12 years. Oh, I think I might have froze. I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you tell me if you can still hear me? Okay, cool. And then, yeah, I started an agency back in 2017. I sold it in 2021. Also came into AdLeaks in the original cohort when it launched. And then that picture is a picture of myself and my family. And that's there for you guys to relate to me and like me more. I'm also, the main thing about me is I'm a diver. I'm not actually a diver. That's not me, but I'm a deep dive guy. So I have a podcast where I deep dive into brands. I have like inside, network of inside sources on a lot of big brands. Obviously I have Triple Whale. I do a lot of spying. So I'm like really just kind of trying to be plugged into what's working at all times. So quick outline of this call or this presentation. I'm going to do this in 2 parts. If you guys have been around for a while, you might remember this meme, the virgin complicated media buyer versus the Chad. And I think that, we're basically, this meme was going around at a time where we were like, look, you got to be more like the Chad. It's going to work better for you. I think you need to be both at different times. And that's how I'm going to split up this presentation. So I think before the ad account, before you ever step foot into your ad account, before you ever click into Facebook Ads Manager, and this is going to be mostly geared toward Facebook, by the way, you should probably have a little bit more of that sort of virgin complicated energy. You should really kind of know a lot of things before you even get into the ad account. And then inside the ad account, I think you could be a little bit more of a Chad.
Do you want to cycle your video once to see if it comes back? I think video is froze, but
yeah,
if not, not a big deal.
Hey, there we go.
Yep. There you go. Nice reshare screen.
Cool. One quick thing, I'm not going to be talking about creative today. I love creative. Creative is the most important thing in the ad account. I'm going to be talking numbers and optimization and scaling. So how I want to do questions, Justin, you're going to kind of be my question gatherer here, or my response gatherer here. You can ask a clarifying question at any time. I won't see it because I'm not I'm on Zoom. And I'll try to stop periodically to answer those clarifying questions. And then I'm trying to leave some time at the end for more deep diver scenario type questions that are more tailored to your circumstances. So part 1, before you open, when you get the chat and when you got the chat energy. So how do you decide how much money to spend in your ad account? I think this is one of the biggest things I see that is inherently flawed, especially in e-commerce. A lot of people are like, oh, I just shoot for 25% myrrh or a 4 blended ROAS. And that's actually a pretty flawed way to think about it. Or even better, like sometimes you talk to big brands and you'll be like, how do you decide what your budget is? And they're like, I don't know. Finance tells me. I don't know how they come up with it. Uh, Also, what kind of ad account it is. I have a theory after looking like at a bunch of different ad accounts. I have a theory that there's only like three different types of ad accounts. I put them into three different buckets. And then how to set proper targets inside the ad account. And because that was a super boring slide, I put a GIF of Taylor Swift saying, let's fucking go, because that's the energy we need right now. How do you decide how much to spend? So how much did you spend? This is a rhetorical question. I don't need answers, but how much did you spend on ads last month on all channels for one account, for one brand? So if you're an agency, just think like one client. If you're internal, across all channels on one, for one brand, how did you decide that number? For the most part, the way that we're deciding that number is that like I don't know, the agency, like the brand tells us that we need to hit a certain ROAS in the ad account, right? Or the brand tells us a budget and we just spend the budget. Or my boss tells me a budget and I just spend it, or whatever it is, right? For the most part, I think it's like a pretty bad heuristic for deciding on budgets. So I'm just gonna pop over to this Google sheet really quick. And this is built for ecom, but there is one that's more like affiliate oriented. There's a tab that's more affiliate oriented here, and I think they get the slides after this, right? Yeah. Okay. So it's there. It's linked in the slides. But like, let's say you have a brand that has 35% landed cost of goods sold. So I sell these headphones. I sell them for $100. They cost me $35 to land to the customer. Not really. Those are super cheap headphones, but just for example's sake, they cost me $35 to land to the customer. So that's right there. And then there's some level of fixed cost that I have. So I have some software that I pay for. I might have some team members or some VAs. I might have rent that I pay for. Probably if I'm just selling headphones, probably not. I'm most likely a drop shipper. But I have some sort of fixed costs. Biggest one might be my own salary, team member salaries, or key stakeholder owner salaries, right? So there's some level of like, we got to get above that bar in profit every month. So the way that we do that at 200,000 is probably like, we have to have this incredible ROAS. So I'm going to guess that we have to have like maybe a 10 ROAS at 200,000 to make a moderate net margin. So that's your like net profit in the end, only a 17.5% net margin. And that's not actually too bad for ecom. So, we can make that 30,000, 6.67 blended ROAS to make a pretty modest net margin if I only do 200K. But let's just do this. Let's say 25,000. Let's say we want a net margin of 15%. What does it take to get a net margin of 15% if I can just double my revenue to 400K? I bet you I could do it with, I can get a better net margin with only a 4 ROAS, half the ROAS, and an even better net profit number, even better net margin number. So the truth is, if we're trying to optimize for either a net profit number or a net margin number, we should actually be spending a higher percentage of our revenue on ads as we grow. The reason is because we clear this by more. We clear the fixed cost by more. It goes from being like it's like your personal finances. When you have when you're young and you're poor, whatever, like a big steak dinner, that's like a lot, like that's like a week's pay, right? But as you get older and you get more money, it's less and less, right? So those fixed costs become like relatively less money as we grow. And sure, the fixed costs do grow. We have to add customer service reps, whatever, but they don't grow at the same level that like the ad spend grows and the landing cost of goods sold grows with every order, right? So there's one of these for affiliate as well. There's just a $0, it's value per conversion instead of landed cost of goods sold. But that's the biggest thing that we're missing when we're setting our budgets, because a lot of times we're just kind of saying, oh, we want a 5 blended ROAS, or here's the budget and it's this percentage of our revenue or something like that. And we're not really saying, okay, well, what if things go really well and we do way more revenue than we thought we were going to do? Can we actually sell more?
What's your thought process on new customer CPA? Like, I know a lot of brands do Mayor, a lot of them, then a lot of them say, well, it's kind of a joke because I have, 60, 70% returning customer rate.
Yeah.
I can communicate with those people through SMS and email.
That's still going to be the limiting factor of budget, right? So yeah, my theory here is that most of your, if you're a brand like that has a lot of returning customer revenue, most of your advertising efforts should be directed toward getting new customers. The limiting factor of budget is going to be how much can I spend and still make a profit and have free cash flow, right? And a lot of that will be fueled by my past customers.
Right, but if you're doing like a mare, right? So if you're looking at a mare base and you have a high returning customer rate and you're optimizing towards a mare,
uh-huh.
a lot of that, I guess, would not necessarily be considered incremental revenue due
Yeah,
to the
that your spend doesn't have to be creating incremental revenue. I'm just talking about how we set the budget. Because I'll get a little bit into like how we set the targets for a new customer CPA and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is, like, let's say you do $1 million and 700K of that comes from returning customers, but your media buying sucks and you're not good at getting new customers. That doesn't mean you should only spend 50K because you're not good at media buying. Like, that's what you should do if you want to shrink over time.
Yep.
You should probably still spend 300 or 400 or 500K or something like that, and even though the new customer CPA is high, you should probably still continue to acquire new customers. Just make sure that you're setting your budget based on making a profit.
Yep.
That's the core thing I'm getting at here. Is just
Got it. Makes sense. Yep.
Right. So, yeah, the Google Sheet turns our chat on. He gets excited about it. All right. What kind of ad account is it? So this is all the stuff that's like before the ad account, right? If we're just kind of reminding you. So first of all, how we set our budgets. Second, what kind of ad account is it? I think there's really 3 core ad accounts here. There's like the cash flipper. This is most affiliates. This is most lead gen. This is going to be your drop shippers, low end offers, with like 1-click upsells, or anybody who's like one winning product. So that example I gave you earlier of the headphones, that's going to be a one winning product brand or a drop shipping brand. These are the simplest brands to run as a media buyer, and oftentimes the most fun. If you can crack them and get them to work, like, you can really scale these and it's fun. The fun always ends. No offer lasts forever. But yeah, so that's kind of like one type of ad account. Next type of ad account is an LTV based brand. And this is what you were just kind of talking about, Justin, where there's going to be some portion of revenue coming from past customers, and you're buying against an LTV to some degree, right? And you might be buying and still be trying to make a day 0 profit and make a profit on the first order, or you might be like, it's impossible for us to make a profit on the first order, but we can make a profit at 30 days or 60 days or something like that, right? So this is going to be most memberships, apps, some high ticket lead gen, and honestly, most e-commerce brands these days. If you're not a drop shipper, this is most e-commerce brands these days. So clothing brands, supplements, beauty, those are the classic examples, but even accessory brands are kind of like this, that are the ones that are still alive, at least. And then the last is an ecosystem brand. And this is kind of the toughest brand to deal with as a media buyer, but the best kind of brand to own. So this is going to be any Fortune blank. If it's Fortune 100, Fortune 500, Fortune 10, whatever, any company like that, it's an ecosystem brand. Anytime there's lots of offline ads, so maybe there's TV, out of home, podcasts, anything like that. If the brand is doing 100 million plus in revenue, or sometimes even 50 million plus in revenue, if 60% of the more of the revenue is coming from past customers, those are all sort of like check boxes in the column of like, this might be an ecosystem brand. So an LTV brand oftentimes scales up to being an ecosystem brand. Basically any brand where it's hard as hell to tell where the sales are coming from. And attribution, even with an attribution tool like Triple Whale, is tenuous at best. Cool. So what drop a 1, 2, or 3? I didn't know what platform we'd be doing this on, so I don't know if there's like a live chat or anything like that. But Justin, if you want to like kind of look at that and just tell me if.
Can you go back to the slide before so people can see what the 1, 2, 3s are?
Yeah. Well, just if there's any section that I can like kind of go, like, if we don't have very many ecosystem people who are dealing with ecosystem companies here, then I can go over that more quickly.
There was a question about you mentioned 3 different types of ad accounts.
Yeah, that's what those were. Yeah. So that's what those were. So, and I guess I'm saying brand, I'm interchanging that. An ad account for an ecosystem brand, an ad account for an LTV brand.
Got it. Okay. I thought maybe like there was a theory of like Facebook having 3 different types of ad accounts based on like maybe certain metrics, and they bucket you or something.
Yeah, I think I have some conspiracy theories around that. Like, I think there are certain ad accounts where CBOs don't work and stuff like that. I'm trying to keep out of conspiracy theory land and just a little bit more firm. But All right, cool. So let me know if there's like any of these that people like that just aren't being dropped as
But
much.
mainly ecom for sure. More of the
Okay,
ecom side.
cool, cool, cool. All right. So how do we set, and then the third part of this before the ad account thing is how do we set proper targets and goals? So we've all heard this, the numbers don't lie, data doesn't lie, right? We've all heard that phrase, which is the biggest lie, ironically. Most data does lie. And this is not just like in marketing, this is like, when you hear data in like political rhetoric or whatever, right? It's mostly cherry picked. So I don't know how numbers couldn't lie if we have Facebook here, for example. Facebook saying a 14.22, and this isn't even a triple whale like pitch. I'm just saying that, Facebook says 14.22 ROAS, and we've got it at 2.58. So somebody's numbers are full of shit here. And I think that it's not necessarily that Facebook is like being purposely deceptive, or even that triple whale is not being like tracking accurately. I think what it really comes down to is for a lot of ecom brands these days, it's kind of like I don't know if you know whose line is it anyway, but he would always say at the beginning of the show, he'd say everything. He'd have this point system, but he'd say everything's made up and the points don't matter, and he'd just arbitrarily give people points. And I think that's pretty much what attribution is. So whenever somebody with no context tells me like, yeah, we try and hit like a 3 ROAS in our ad account, I'm like, great, yeah, I think we should try. I think we should shoot for 3 dragons instead. Like it's an equally useful unit of measurement without more context. And I'm not saying that ROAS is like I'm not like a never ROAS kind of guy here. I'm just saying that like it all depends on how you're doing the attribution, really. So the main thing that I think about it is that the numbers mean nothing no matter how you measure them. If you start with that as a base idea, we can add context and make them mean more from there. Primarily, they're just relative to themselves, right? So if your ROAS is better today than it used to be, then your business is probably doing better. So it is a good directional tool, but that's kind of like the biggest thing I think. And the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of times I'm going to, in a second here, maybe tell you guys, hey, instead of optimizing for ROAS, you should optimize for new customer ROAS on a clicks only basis. And then your number is going to look way worse. And while you might conceptually think, yeah, I get it, numbers without context mean nothing, when you're actually going into the ad account and looking at a 0.75 new customer ROAS on a clicks only basis, it hurts your soul a little bit. So like you really have to buy into the doctrine of the numbers are made up and everything's made up and the points don't matter, right? In order to like actually focus on the numbers that are driving the best business objectives. All right, cool. Monthly targets and goals. So first of all, how much do we trust the numbers? For the cash flipper, we can actually trust the numbers quite a bit for the cash flipper ad account. Just because it's so simple. Usually the platform numbers are pretty close to real. So if the platform says you've got a $32 CPA, you probably have like a $25 or $30 CPA or something like that, or maybe a $40 CPA. So with the cash flippers, very simple. You just follow the platform. Cash flippers probably have about the least use for a third-party attribution tool like Triple Whale. How do you set your monthly budgets and ad account targets? You just literally try and optimize for the platform CPA. Use the Virgin Google Sheet to figure out your budget, and that's it. There is no step 2. So the cash flipper is very simple. If you're a drop shipper, if you're like a one product e-commerce, if you're buying on a one product e-commerce ad account. All right, LTV, this is where it gets a little more complicated. How much can we trust the numbers? We have the largest range here. So what our ad account says, or even what Triple Whale says might change based on your attribution model by a lot. What the ad account says, I say it's probably somewhere between 10% and 700% in its inaccuracy. So it's like there's this huge range of how accurate it could be. And here's where looking at like multiple attribution models is very helpful. Here's how I set targets for LTV brands. So I think about it in 3 tiers. The first 2 tiers are not going to be based on the ad account. So the first tier is basically just going to be using that spend and revenue sheet to figure out what are the different levels, right? So do I have an example here? Yeah, here's an example. So like, 150K to 200K, we want to hit a 5 blended ROAS, 200K to 250, we want to hit a 4.5. So that's the first tier. So it's a 3-tier goal system. That's tier 1. Tier 2 is like usually a volume goal, like, hey, we want to hit this much in revenue. I actually think, pro tip, a better goal than a volume goal, if you're for media buyers, a better goal than a volume goal, because a lot of that'll come from email and stuff like that. A better goal is new customer orders. So you should try and drive more new customer orders. You have a little bit more control over that as a media buyer. And then the third tier is actually like your meta goal. Like, hey, can we spend 50K and have a new customer CPA under $147 using this attribution model?
The question, it's kind of related, but it's how would you calculate your budget when you're starting a new brand from scratch?
How much money do I have? That's a tough one. I mean, maybe a little more context would help, but the main calculator is going to be how much money I have. And then if I have access to plenty of money, then knowing that I might lose money when I launch, then I would basically say I would multiply what I think a reasonable CPA would be by, like, I don't know, 10 or 20 or 30. And I would use that as an initial ad account budget.
Especially on a new ad account, because it takes a while for it to learn. So typically, you're result.
And if your answer is like, oh, I have all the money in the world as long as I'm getting a positive return, I mean, no. No. Assume you're going to make nothing back. How much money do you have now? And then it's going to probably, the answer is like 5 or 10K a month, unless they're funded. And then I would say, oh, you should probably multiply what you think. You just run some ads first, see what the CPA you get is, and then multiply that by like 30, or if you've got a bunch of money, then 30 to 50 or something like that, and say that's my ad account budget until further notice.
I can't stop watching this fucking guy throw bricks.
I know, dude, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, that guy is skilled. If I could do that, I would just quit marketing, and that'd be my gig. But yeah, so my tier 3 goal, that's the ad account goal. And then this is how I guide teams. This is how I grade myself if it's me managing it for my own brand. This is how I guide agencies. And when I was an agency, this is how I had clients guide me. I would say, hey, we need to set these goals up. And it's just a grading system. If I hit the first one, that's a C. Like, if we don't hit that first one, that should be very hittable. If we don't hit that, then we're in trouble. Because that means we're not profitable. If we hit 1 and 2, then that's a B. And if we hit 1, 2, and 3, that's an A. So kind of like making the ad account numbers less important is the like TLDR of this whole thing, right? Ecosystem brands. Did we have very many people say that they were like buying on ad accounts that were ecosystem brands? Because this is the like most complicated thing.
I didn't see, when you say ecosystem, can you define that? Like,
that was, yeah. So going back to that, that's kind of like usually just bigger is like a short definition.
Like large, like top 5,000.
Lots of offline ads usually, or podcast, or they're doing 100 million plus, sometimes 50 million plus. A lot of it comes from past customers.
We definitely do. A lot of those people that are in the group, I know quite a few of them. They're not as active. They're more like so busy in the day to day, but we do have those. So it would be
all right, cool. So let's cover this. So basically, we cannot trust the numbers in ad account at all. These are the kinds of brands where the ad account will say you have like a 17 or 20 ROAS or something like that. We even can, like, third party attribution is helpful, but if you're looking to answer the question, where are my sales coming from, it's kind of a fool's errand. Like, we're going to get some intelligence about where, what impact different channels have, but we're never going to be able to answer the question, where are the sales coming from? Because it's an ecosystem, right? And then platform targets are pretty much irrelevant to even other platforms. So you can't even compare really Google and Facebook that well. And just a quick note on why I call it an ecosystem brand. So I think of your business as like a lion, or the business that you're buying media for. Think of it as like a lion, or any animal that lives in an ecosystem, but I got a lion here. So we're going to use a lion. Lions, I like lions because they're an apex predator, but they only live in one place in the world. So they have an ideal ecosystem that's kind of perfect for them, Africa, right? You took a lion and you put it in a different ecosystem, let's say Australia. Australia is a pretty similar ecosystem, and there's not an apex predator there. So a lion might be okay in Australia, but probably not as good as it would be in Africa. If you took a lion and you put it in the Amazon, it would struggle. It might survive, but it might not. And it definitely wouldn't be an apex predator. They're not really built to climb. If you took it and you put it in like Alaska, it'd just die because it wouldn't be built for the cold. So your business is the ecosystem, and the media mix right? What percentage of your budget you're spending on different channels, and what percentage of your traffic is coming from different channels. That's the ecosystem. So the biggest thing I see with ecosystem brands is when they start failing and doing bad, they're like, oh yeah, the last 6 month things have been going really bad, but like, back in, July through October of last year, things were great. If I go back and look at that, I'm like, well, you took your lion, you put it in Montana, dude. Like that's it's a completely different. You tested all this new shit, and now your ecosystem's all messed up. So if we just maybe go back to an ecosystem that was similar to your thriving ecosystem, that probably will help. And I know that's like not super. It's like, oh, we want to be able to say, hey, I spent $1 on Facebook and I made $10 back. But with an ecosystem ad account, we just can't do that. We can only say, let's optimize the ecosystem to make it as ideal as possible for the brand. So that's the mindset here. I still use a 3-tier goal system for an agency or for a media buyer or whatever. Step 1 is always, what can we spend at different revenue levels? Step 2 here is an initiative specific like performance target that's designed to create the ecosystem. So I might say, can we spend between 750K and $1 million at a new customer CPA target of under 270 using this attribution model if I'm talking to my meta agency or my meta media buyer. But if I'm talking to my head of growth, he might have a different set of tier 2 goals, right? And then these brands, ecosystem brands, a lot of times there's a lot of players. Like we're talking about bigger teams here usually. And then step 3 is usually a controllable. And the reason I do this is because I think the biggest thing that brings down these kinds of brands is actually people trying to be relevant, right? Like people change the ecosystem because they're trying to make their job relevant and they're trying not to lose their job and they're trying to like seem useful to the company. And I like that sounds kind of like, I don't know, maybe it sounds like a little negative or whatever, but if you're just running Facebook and Google ads for a brand like this, does that really justify a 5-person marketing team? No, they got to try a bunch of other shit that might actually mess up the ecosystem. So the big thing that I do here is like, I give people like action goals that I think create the outcomes that we want and create the ecosystem that we want, so that they're not saying, hey, we should go try postcards when postcards might not really be the play because they're just trying to make themselves relevant, right? That all makes sense to everybody? Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, there's an example, of a goal set that I might do for agency or for a team member or for myself. If I'm not getting these goals from the top down, but I'm managing one of these ad accounts, I would just do this for myself. Cool. That was kind of a lot of the before the ad account work, but you remember I said, that's when you should have that sort of virgin complicated energy. In the ad account, I think there's a little more Chad energy. So I want to do a quick pause for questions. Were there any others that I know you kind of asked me them in live time, so we can maybe move on, but
I think so. I think you're good.
All right, cool. In the ad account, this is when we're doing our Chad energy. So basically, which one of these describes the ad account? And I'm mainly going to refer to Meta here. I think some of this applies to Google as well. Is this ad account in a bull period of time? Is this ad account bearish, or do you not know? And if you don't know, here's a good heuristic. With the current performance, could you scale this ad account by 20% per week for forever? If the answer is yes, it's in a bull period. If the answer is no, it's in a bear period. And if the answer is I don't know, my response is yeah, you do. You like just do the math. Could you do that with and do you have like a reason to believe that it would actually result in like enough business results that that the brand would want to continue to do that? All right, so optimizing, and scaling if you're a bull, if your ad account's in a bull period, or if your ad account's bullish. So the mindset here is that we want to test every single creative we launch because we have a high hit rate on creatives. If an ad account's in a bull period, it has a high hit rate on creatives. And more creative testing will just bring more horizontal scale to the ad account. Scale is good because scale equals profit for a bull ad account. So I do 2 campaigns per offer. I do a creative testing campaign and a winners campaign. You rarely need to run multiple offers. I think for some clothing brands, that'd be the exception there, where I'd say you should run some one offer would be like tops, one offer might be bottoms, one offer might be all products, one offer might be hats, right? So you should maybe run 2 to 4 of your top selling collections or product categories. No retargeting. I don't retarget. I don't recommend people retarget at all anymore. Meta just takes care of most of the retargeting. It already does it. And then optimization, we're going to define our keep cut points, which we should have already done before the ad account. Like we're going to define what our targets are in this ad account, and that's going to sort of drive our keep cut points. And then we're going to get into scaling here. So first of all, the creative testing campaign, here's how I structure it. I do an ABO for the creative testing campaign, or a CBO with minimum spends. Either works. Budget per ad set, I'm not going to give you advice on that because I actually think there's lots of factors there, but enough budget that you're going to get a good test. Ad sets contain either DCTs or groups of very similar creatives. So I think of these as like little mutual funds where it's like, I don't really care which one of these, if I do like multiple creatives in there, I don't really care which one of these Facebook picks. They're all just variations of each other. Or I've grouped them together in a way that makes sense to me, or you can just do a dynamic creative. Optimization here is there's two levels. There's the initial rollout. So when you're creative testing, there's the initial rollout, and then there's the after the initial rollout, or after it's tested period. So I cut at the ad set level here. Remember, that's why I'm grouping creatives together in similar like clusters. So I cut at the ad set level. Once an ad set gets to 3 times CPA target, it needs to have sales. If it does no sales, then it gets cut. If it gets to 6 to 10 times CPA target, you can use your judgment within that range. It needs to be within 10% of my performance target, or it gets cut. So that doesn't mean that performance target has to be related to CPA. I'm just using CPA as the multiplier to know if it has enough spend. So if it gets to 6 to 10 times target and your new customer ROAS CPA is 1.2 and it's at like 0.7, then you cut the ad set. I'm going to give a little advice here and say you should optimize for click-based new customer metrics most of the time. So whether you do that in Facebook or whether you do that in Triple Whale, I think it's easier, but that's what you should optimize for. Don't optimize for clicks and views. Don't optimize for ROAS overall, new customer ROAS or new customer CPA on a click-based model. After a creative is tested, and that's all of it. It's not just for Bowl ad accounts, that's everybody. After a creative's tested, I like to do it this way. I pick 2 days a week that are my keep cut days. And I think this works really well. And I've trained a lot of media buyers to do it this way. So it could be Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday. I like those kind of like 3-day, 4-day groupings. And I'm always just looking at rolling 7. So that way I don't have to look at it on 14 days and then on 3 days and 7 days. And like I'm looking at all these time periods and trying to make a judgment on this. It's like, no, I do this twice a week. And I look at the last 7 days. And if something is within 10% of target, then it's good. If it's not within 10% of target, it gets a strike. And it only gets 2 or 3 strikes before I cut it. And it's just very simple, right? And this is your creative testing campaign. So, it doesn't matter if you need to cut it. I never scale in my creative testing campaign. I never scale at the ad set level. But I do leave the ad sets running. So if something's good, if something's more than 10% better than my target, then I'll graduate it to my winners campaign and I'll just leave it running, but I won't scale it in the creative testing campaign. Justin, did that, the way I laid that out, did all make sense? Did you follow that? Because I know it's a lot of talking. Okay, cool. Winners campaign. So the ad posts graduate from the creative testing campaign. I just do a CBO or an Advantage Plus here. I think a lot of people are hating Advantage Plus right now. I'm not seeing, the reason people are hating on Advantage Plus is because they're like, oh, it just targets past customers. They all do that. So CBO does that too. So I don't think Advantage Plus is like a bigger culprit there. So I'm not necessarily concerned whether it's CBO or Advantage Plus for the winners campaign at the moment. If the catalog, and if it is Advantage Plus, you can put a catalog in there, like if it's a clothing brand. If the catalog is hogging all the spend though, you can dupe it. So you could have 2 winners campaigns, one that has catalog, one that doesn't.
You can also set a percentage of like, and obviously we don't know how well it works, but you can set a percentage of how much new customer versus existing customer.
You can, and it is hard to say. So for like an ecosystem brand that has a lot of revenue coming from past customers, my observation is it works little to not, like you could set it to 0 and it still targets a lot of past customers. But every campaign type will do that. Advantage Plus, CBO, they'll all do that. You could use exclusions. The best way actually to make Facebook not do that is to optimize for click only and not click and view. So yeah, and then inside that, it's one ad set, broad targeting. And if you think you're an exception to using broad targeting, you're probably not, but you could be. I guess there are some exceptions. My brand, for example, I do use some lookalikes still. So one ad set, broad targeting. And again, same kind of optimization cycle though. So we have 2 keep cut days per week. We look at every ad on a rolling 7-day basis. an ad must spend 4 times CPA for consideration. So if it's one of the ads at the bottom that's not getting spend, I don't even mess with it. I'm like, I'm not going to keep cut that. I'm just going to leave it alone. It already was a winner before it got in here. So I'm just going to leave it alone. So I'm just going to look at the ads on a 7-day basis that are getting 4 times CPA and spend. And, you know, they're either within 10% of target, or they get a strike and they get 2 or 3 strikes before they get cut. If the campaign is doing really well, and if the business is doing really well, then I might give more leeway to this top spending ad. I might give it 15 or 20%. It's like, things are going overall well, and this top spending ad is a lot of that. So even if its performance is a little worse, then I'll give it more leeway. All right, and then scaling the winner's campaign 20% per week for forever. You can go more frequent than that. You could go 10% every few days. So I like to keep, like the same way I have keep cut days, I like to have scale days as well, where I only scale on those days and I look at a rolling 7. You can scale more aggressively if you're only a bull seasonally. So this is a lot of brands that have big Q4s. You want to scale more aggressively, and probably scale 20% maybe every day. You want to start your winners campaign pretty high. If you're in a bull ad account, you can afford to just like roll out spend on that winners campaign and start it pretty high. So 20% jumps in budget are significant. If you're a cash flipper, then or if your performance is so good you become a cash flipper, then you can do a lot of this sort of old school scaling methods that used to make their way around ad leaks. So that'd be your shotgun scurf method, that'd be your dupe ad sets to high budget method. In your creative testing campaign, use manual bids. So those are going to be probably pretty short term these days though. Cool. All that makes sense. Bull ad accounts. All right, let's move to bears. So summary here is the core mindset of the bull is I want to make sure to force spend every test because my hit rate is high and it will give me more scale. The core way this is the sort of my core structure, but there's variations. So think of it as like a play. If any of you guys are sports people, like, basketball, I like basketball. Pick and roll is sort of like a play, but there's like so many variations of running a pick and roll. So there's a lot of variations to this core play, but a winner's campaign and a testing campaign and winner's campaign is sort of the core thing. All right, so bears. And this is like a lot of this structure. Not every brand is running this, but most of the brands that are like really crushing it on Meta right now are doing one of these two. So bears, and I just want to say that a lot of brands are scaling up pretty high using this structure. They hit this ceiling where their account is now actually a bull account and they need a creative testing campaign. But this, like a bear structure, can actually give you pretty good performance and scale you up pretty high. In my brand, I use this structure. So it's the same thing, except for I just do one campaign. There's not a creative testing campaign. So the mindset here is that we need to hedge against bad spend, and rolling out spend to every single creative test is going to be bad spend for the most part because our hit rate is low. So we're going to put our new creative tests into the same campaign as our already winning creatives, and they're going to get less spend. That is how it works, but we're hedging against bad spend here. So same kind of thing though, one campaign, no retargeting, little to no audience testing, and we'll talk optimization and scaling, but it's a lot of the same aside from having the scaling campaign. So CBO or Advantage Plus, if you're using Advantage Plus, you can put the catalog in there, launch new ads into that active ad set with the catalog. I would not run a second, if you're in the bear period, I would not run a second campaign without the catalog though, if you're in a bear ad account. Same thing with creative testing on initial rollout. So 3 times CPA with no sales, you cut it. 6 to 10 times it needs to be within 10% of your target or you cut it. And then you have 2 keep cut days a week. You look at rolling 7 days, it needs to be within 10% of the target where it gets a strike. Top spending ad can get more leeway, and the target might be based on a campaign average if you're really bearish, right? So if the ad account's performing really bad, the target that you're using to keep cut within 10% of, it might not be the target that you actually want. It might be more based on like, what am I getting? What's the average of this campaign? Because what you want is just like so far away that you're just going to cut everything.
You're doing a lot of your cuts with rules. I suppose you're using rules.
Some rules. Yeah, you can use rules for some of this, but that's why I like the days instead. So it makes your days really simple. It's like you have 2 keep cut days a week, maybe 2 scale days a week, and 1 launch day a week. Then you really don't at any given time have very much work to do in the ad account on any day. Another thing I'm saying here is you could use rules, but these are the core rules. And I would say that they're like 80 or 90% of the time you want to follow the rules, but you also, there's some judgment that comes in too, where you might say, hey, this ad isn't within 10% of my target, but I want to keep it on because XYZ. Like you have a good reason. So you can still use judgment within these. These aren't hard and fast. So I don't use rules because I want to kind of do it manually and use my judgment. But you could totally use rules for this, and plenty of brands do. So a lot of brands that have like multiple geos, right? They got an AU store and an US store and a UK store, and they got ad accounts for all of them. They've got to use rules because it's just too much to keep up with. And then here with your scaling, you want to scale the campaign as often as possible. Again, using 1 to 2 scaling days per week and looking at a rolling 7. You want to scale the campaign as often as possible if business results are good. If the overall business results aren't good, you're not going to scale. Obviously, you're going to focus on optimization and cutting, but try not to scale down. So scale down if you have to, but try not to scale down with this. The whole point of this model is you're just like building a fund of good performing stuff over time. And you're like slowly inching it up over time until you become a bear ad account or a bull ad account. Over time, you might find new tests don't get as much spend and your results continue to be good. Meaning if you get to a point where you're scaling 20% every week, now you're a bull. And probably your new tests aren't getting any spend in that campaign because you got too many winners in there. Then you got to launch a creative testing campaign. Cool. Did that all track? So there's the summary. The core mindset is forcing spend to every test is causing too much wasted spend, and I need to prioritize performance over information. That makes sense the way that I laid it. Yep. That's pretty much what I have. So we can do like a quick Q&A if you guys want. Just a little plug, little pitch before the Q&A. Obviously, check out Triple Whale. I'm the head of consulting at Triple Whale. You can book a call with me if any of this was like, yeah, this is great. I would like you to look particularly at my circumstance though. So there's a QR code. Some of you guys might be on your phone. There's a link right there that you can, I guess, type into your browser or something. And that's sort of my like link in bio. So you can also see my podcast there and my newsletter and stuff like that.
Is that built into like Triple Whale memberships to have you look at stuff?
So yeah, certain levels there's it's a paid add-on service is a short answer. So it's pretty cheap. It's like $500 a month for weekly calls, weekly 30-minute calls. But there's certain levels of Triple Whale service where you get like a month free.
Okay. Yeah, I think we onboarded a new person on the enterprise level.
Yeah, so they'll get a month of free consulting, or like 3 calls of free consulting.
Interesting.
Cool. Yeah, if you're on enterprise. Are there other questions bouncing around in there, or do you have any?
Probably more specific on. So I know you guys have Sonar, which I would really, really love to cover and highlight because I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really understand truly how impactful that can be.
Yeah. So if I was breaking that down, how I usually break that down is back when sort of the iOS 14 Mageddon happened, and performance got worse for everybody. There's 2 parts of it. There's the part where there was a bunch of data loss, so we as humans didn't know what to scale and what to keep and what to cut. And then there's the part of it where like Meta actually has some data loss, and that arguably is more important because Meta needs to know the model. Like Meta needs to have the data to target your customers effectively, or your like target people who could be your customers effectively. And so Triple Whale, a tool like Triple Whale that does just attribution modeling, that solves the first part. So like the humans can see what's working and not working. And Sonar solves the second part where we feed the data back to Meta so that it can create better models and targeting, even if you're using broad. It's data enrichment. So oftentimes it will have a higher ROAS once you plug in Sonar. The reported ROAS on Meta will be higher when you plug in Sonar. But the important, and again, the numbers are made up. Nothing matters. Everything's made up. The numbers don't matter. So as long as you have that mindset, I think it's super helpful because it does help Meta target a lot better. Where we're actually seeing like crazy results is on email. So in Klaviyo or any email provider, most e-commerce brands have what are called browse abandon flows. So that is if somebody on your email list is looking at a product on your site, and then they abandon. They don't add it to cart. They're just looked at a product, but they're on your email list. You can like trigger a flow to like send them an email about that product. And those are pretty high ROI flow. Like those flows usually do pretty good revenue, but Klaviyo is actually missing a lot of matching with users. So plug Sonar in to Meta and Klaviyo. The Meta results are good, but they're a little harder to measure because it's like, it's a paid media platform. But the Klaviyo results are like so much more definitive because you can just see that browse abandonment flow go from sending like 200 a day to like 350 a day. And we've had a few case studies like that where the like browse abandonment flow all of a sudden started sending way more volume and they started getting way more money, like true incremental revenue from more browse abandonment sending.
Yeah, we're seeing pretty good results with the Sonar stuff in Klaviyo for add to
Yeah.
cart the product. You do see a huge data lift in terms of revenue that completes. So
Yeah, and just the volume that it sends, like I never really thought of the idea that Klaviyo was missing, like that Klaviyo is just missing people that are on the email list and are browsing. You know what I mean?
yep.
But it's missing a lot because Klaviyo is not really a data company. So Meta, I would actually argue that I think in some cases Sonar doesn't help as much with your Meta ads because I don't know if Meta's really missing any data. Like this is a big priority for them. But Klaviyo, it's not a big priority for them. So they're missing a lot. It's just like not one of their core competencies as a company.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, for sure.
If anybody has any questions, as you can tell, obviously John is super duper smart, willing to help. Been with ad leaks, I think, for a long time. So
Yeah,
really, really appreciate the time.
for sure.
Very, very, very insightful. Would love to do it again. So
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Anytime. And yeah, I mean, I left the thing up there for long enough, but also you can just like hit me up on Facebook or whatever, and I'll try and respond. I check my message request folder like fairly regularly. So even if we're not connected, I'll check it.
I'm really bad at that on Messenger. I hate how they added those two new folders. There's like spam
Yeah.
and people you may know. And it's like I never check it, so I never get.
Especially these days, if you're on like multiple social media, like I used to just be on Facebook and that was it, and now I'm
Yeah,
like on Instagram and Twitter. And so I'm like having to check stuff everywhere. Yeah.
yeah. All right, cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, you know where to find him. Otherwise, we'll see you for the next one. Thanks,
Cool.
guys.
See ya.
Later.